The living organization was created really for one primary reason, and that is to help leaders create better results. Now, there's a lot of talk about different ways of working. If you're familiar with some of those, the new ways of working, teal, conscious capitalism, business agility, the future of work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I like to look at them as is aspirational. They give us a good vision of where we'd like to go. And one of the challenges that we seem to have is how do you get those aspirational ways of working implemented? And one of the things we hear a lot from CEOs is they're nice, but look, I got to get results done. So, what kind of results are we talking about when we look at the living organization framework? This is a sample of some of our latest work with some clients. And the reason I show it is because it'll point out something that happens when you implement the living organization framework. One, we achieve the goals they want to achieve much faster. One example, they set a target of achieving certain key corporate-wide initiatives for a 2-year period, and we accomplished it in less than 18 months. While that's really great, the other thing is almost as a complete byproduct of the way we do it was that we've increased employee engagement from 37%, which was already higher than the average, to over 78%. And they felt they had greater collaboration, basically no silos. Everybody was looking out for the welfare of the larger organization. They were able to pivot faster. And one of the comments from the CEO, actually 2 CEOs, was he just found that the people were operating in a way like he didn't have to parent them anymore. They were taking more responsibility, more ownership for the well-being of the whole organization, which he really liked. So that gives you a sense of what actually happens when we look at implementing things in a new way. Now, you'll see these are all the things that the aspirational philosophies, if you want to call them that, teal and so forth, tries to accomplish or says is possible. And we actually have a way of making that happen. The way that's done is we have a framework, we call it obviously the living organization framework. First and foremost, we focus on the results. The second most important thing is that we shift the way we look at an organization. And then we ask the question, how does a living person rather than a machine actually create outcomes? We look at the way of, we have a big focus on integration, and I'll talk about all of these. And the goal really is to build capacity. And we also talk about how we work to change the leadership mindset. So these are the things we actually will be talking about in the workshop. So let me just run through each of them really briefly to give you a sense of it. So in today's world, we think of an organization as a machine to be programmed by the leadership team. And that is not what an organization is. It is not a structured machine. While it's nice to think of it that way, because it makes the decision-making process a lot easier, you don't have to worry about that nasty, messy human factor. It also blinds us to what all the dynamics of an organization are. So we start off with the fundamental belief that an organization is a relationship ecosystem. Everything's in relationship with everything else. Organizations are in relationship with customers, with suppliers, with stakeholders. It's all about relationships. It's not about transactions. And internally, it's the same thing. And if you don't acknowledge the relationship ecosystem, then you're really limiting everything to silos and specialization and transactions, and you lose all of the things we want, like creativity and imagination. And that's where the whole essence of what it means to be a person. Right? A person has certain key attributes of creativity, imagination. They carry a sense of character and values, and they bring a sense of emotion. Passion is another way to say that. Engagement is another way to say that. Values, and the social animals, the social beings. So relationships is what it's all about. The interesting thing is if you step back from the individual, which a lot of people recognize this, and we want to get all of the individuals aligned and engaged and passionate, committed. When individuals join collectives, think about your sales department or your engineering department. And if you step back and think about them, the sales department, while it's made up of individuals, or the engineering department is made up of individuals, the department as a whole has its own personality. It has a collective personality. And whatever it is, it could be branch offices. One branch office will have a different personality than another branch office. Accounting has a different personality than engineering. And this is really important to being able to leverage and scale performance, because you're dealing not with 10 people in the department or 100 people in an organization or 100,000 people in an organization. You're really dealing with a few personalities in your various larger level departments. If you step back, like I said, if you think about an organization, and they have personalities. I mean, Apple is a different company than Microsoft. You remember the commercials, the ads where they used to have Mr. Mac and Mr. PC. They were dressed differently. They looked differently. They carried a different persona. They have different values, different characters, different ways of operating, different ways of being. When you ask the question, how do people get things done? How does an individual, and from now on, when you hear me use the word individual, you can think of an individual department, an individual person, or an individual company, or an individual business unit. The principles are scaled throughout. And if you look at how we get results, it's simple. We have to do something, right? You don't get results without doing stuff. So on one level, how we do stuff is really important. And we want to focus that, and we want to make it as effective and as efficient as possible. We don't want to waste time or effort. But doing is highly impacted by our interactions. Just think about a group of people doing stuff together. What's more important? What do you see dominating their thinking? What's being done, or how we're getting along together? Think about what blocks the doing. A lot of it is the interactions. And so interacting and paying attention to the interactions is just as important, if not more important, than what we're paying attention to what we're doing. Most implementations of all of these new ways of working spend a lot of time talking about the importance of human interactions, but focus on the implementation and how they do what they do, which is one of the reasons they don't succeed as often as they can. There's also a third component. I want you to think for a moment about a simple action. It could be, I don't know, writing or delivering a presentation, or getting a piece of work done. And I want you to think about three different people. The first person does it with a sense of disgruntledness, not very happy about it, wish they didn't have to do it, doesn't think it should be done. The boss is wrong. They're just making me do it. You get the vision? The second person is really neutral. They go about doing it. They do what they're told. They don't really care one way or the other. They just, come in, do what they're told, and go home. The third person is really engaged, fully committed, really loves what they're doing, likes to contribute, is excited about it, looks for new opportunities. When they're talking to the boss, they're brainstorming ways to do it even better. Same action is being done. The activity does not change. What do you think the different levels of outcome will be in those three ways of being? You see, the way we are being while we're doing what we're doing is as critical, if not more so. So when we look at how do human beings get things done, how we get the outcomes we get, we focus on the activity we do. Clearly, that's important. But we have to remember that the activity we do is significantly impacted by the relationships, the quality of the relationships we have. And even more important, the nature of what we call our context, our way of being, is really critical. So when we think about an organization and how they get things done and how we can get things done faster, if we pay attention to upfront the context of the organization and the relationships of the organization, we can improve the speed of execution very quickly. And that's one of the things we teach in our workshop is how do you pay attention to context and relationships? And how do you as a leader or how do you as a change agent who affects leaders can facilitate that way of thinking differently? There's another thing that we look at. If you look at today's world, when leaders think about approaching getting results, they clearly think about the hot side of things, right? The metrics and the goals and the timelines and the numbers and the processes and what we have to do and when we have to do it. About 50, 60 years ago, there was a new concept introduced called the soft side. The people dynamics, Maslow's hierarchy, McGregor's theory X, theory Y. Do you focus on the work or do you focus on the people? All of these things were introduced over the last 50, 60 years. And today we're talking about things like self-management and purpose-driven organizations and all of that. This has created an either or, sort of a bifurcation of how things get done. And it puts a leader in a really awkward position. One, where do I spend my resources? What do I focus on? Do I spend money on the soft side? Do I spend money on the hard side? I got to get the hard side results, otherwise I won't be here in 2 years. So what do I do? And worse yet, what's the link between the two? How does the soft side affect the hard side? And how does the hard side affect the soft side? And all of that. But the living organization framework takes that dilemma out because we look at it as there is no hard side and soft side. There's just getting results done. And they interact and play with each other. And the way we go about implementing that is basically through the one thing that drives everything, and that is, what is our strategy? What do we want to accomplish? And strategy has a lot of elements to it. And again, I talk about strategy. Most people think of strategy from a point of view of corporate strategy. Well, you as a person, Victoria, you have a strategy. You talked about getting your MBA and wanting to be a CEO someday. Well, you have here's where I am now, and here's where I want to go. And I think the best path to get there is through this roadmap, right? And so it doesn't matter whether you're an individual talking about my individual performance, or you're a department talking about the department's future performance, or you're talking about a multinational corporation. The mapping process is all the same. And you want to look at it as an integrated whole process. And when you're looking at where am I now, which is skill set, capabilities, maturity of an organization, who do we serve? What impact do we want to make? How are we going to do that? What's our purpose? What's our compass? And what are the outcomes we hope to achieve? All of that has to tie together into a cohesive roadmap. Okay? And one of the things we add to it, because of the approach we take that I just explained, is we look at that from what is the activity component of it? So what's the doing part of it? What's the relationship part of it? And then who are we being while we're doing all that? What's our context? And how does that context help us define relationship and activity? It's all geared to, as I said earlier, building capacity. And one of the big changes that's happening that hasn't quite caught up in management thinking, consciously caught up in management thinking, they sort of intuiting it, and we're just making it explicit, is capacity is really defined by the capabilities and maturity of the people, the organization, the processes, and the leadership. So it's an integrated way of looking at capacity. It's not just capacity of plant and equipment, which is the traditional way of looking at it. It's how well can the people and the processing supporting the people and the leadership supporting the process and the people. Because at the end of the day, it's only the people that execute. So if you think about executing your strategy, accomplishing it, you got to look at what's the capacity of the collective to actually execute that strategy. There's and you can see the difference in the way things are executed. And so we developed a way of measuring it. Low maturity people require a lot of direction. High maturity people can operate on their own. The more you are higher on the maturity scale, the faster you can execute. And so, and the other thing is, we recognize that activity-based, when you're low on the maturity scale, you're focused a lot on activity. When you're high on the maturity scale, you're focused a lot on context. And if you go to Frederick Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations, he made the observation that the pioneering CEOs he talked about in this book tended to be high on context. They'd lead with context, and relationship and activity followed almost as if by magic to get the outcomes they wanted. Very little management needed. So we focus, and one of the things we talk about in the workshop is the shift of the role of leadership. If leaders' role in the traditional sense is plan, organize, lead, and control, then employees will follow along. What you find is employees will do, leaders will organize, employees will obey. As a matter of fact, leaders like them when they obey. Leaders will lead and the employees will just follow along. And leaders will control things and employees will report what they did. And you can see that throughout most organizational activities. We changed the role of leadership to setting the context. As I said, that's really critical. Developing the people, that's maturity and capability. Building a sense of community and really focusing on being in service. And therefore, the employees take the role to complement that of employees get to choose, which allows them to grow and mature, which allows them to feel more engaged, which allows them to deliver better outcomes. And the way we go about doing that is teaching in the workshop that's coming up these 5 skills: how to roadmap, how to follow this form of execution road mapping. We teach heart-centered wisdom, which is combining the head and the heart, integrating the two. Storytelling and ritual, which is a skill that helps them define and set context. Improv mindset, which allows them to deal with uncertainty. And integrating opposites, which allows you to deal with ambiguity. So if the goal of lots of people are to go from what we have today, which is an organization that's focused on production and consistency, transactional, centralized, to organizations that create, learn and adapt, relational, network, decentralized decisions, self-management, all those things. The living organization is a path is the bridge to get you from one to the other. So with that, I'll stop the sharing and just have a complete Q&A and remind you that, and Vitaly will put this in the chat, our upcoming workshop that will teach you all the skills necessary, or at least introduce you to all the skills. Skills take time to develop, obviously. But we have one coming up May 11th, and I invite you to sign up. Deborah, can I call upon you to give a bit of a testimonial? Deborah went through an earlier workshop in November, was it?
Sounds like about right.
Yeah, November, December. Um, what was it like?
It was really great. It was kind of mind expanding, I guess, to go back to that philosophical approach, that I was able to almost immediately integrate into my team the attention practice, and that really helped my team to start understanding that we're in relationship with their team members, because I had a group of people that hadn't led before, and so it was helping them kind of build those skills of, you don't tell people what to do, we want them to engage with us, we want, because we don't know the solution necessarily from their seat in the house, and to let them do their best work. So I walked away from it with some really applicable skills.
Thank you, Deborah. That is one thing we focus a lot on, is making the work highly applicable to your challenges. But in the workshop, as Deborah said, it's highly experiential. You learn by doing. But we have one coming up May 11th, and I invite you to sign up.